When we look at the riots of the last eight or 9 days, there are moments in politics where you want to jump on the most minor disagreements you have with the opposition parties and moments when you want to step back and express your broad agreement with the opposition. Is this one of those moments in the latter where you look at what Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper are doing and saying, and that you largely wish them luck and success and applaud what they're doing, or not?
Well, of course I wish them well, because this is a moment of severe national strain and we want the government to be taking all action possible to take back control of our streets and provide the level of safety and security that people in communities across the country are calling for right now. And there are many steps the government has taken that I think are the right ones, whether that's getting more prosecutors, our courts sitting round the clock, urging the police to surge resources into the affected areas. I do, however, think that the Prime Minister has made a mistake in that he has not shown equal treatment to all forms of violence perpetrated by whoever it is, wherever it is in the country. I think it's incredibly important that in this moment we are clear that violent disturbances of this kind, whether they are from the far right or from sectarian gangs, as we've seen more recently, for example, in Birmingham, are equally wrong, and that we call those out and that we urge the police to take action without fear or favour.
Has the Prime Minister done anything against that? He's been very clear that what is wrong is law-breaking, is violence, is thuggery, and he's called that out very, very, very clearly. Does that not apply across the board?
Well, in his public statements, he's actually spoken primarily, if not exclusively, about the thuggery, the violence, the disturbances caused by the far right. And of course that's important, because the actions of the far right, for example, the racist ambushes, the attack on a mosque, are disgraceful. Let me be absolutely clear on that. But I don't think we should be selective or squeamish in the way in which we handle this situation. Violence is violence. And we also need to be clear that there are some instances of sectarian gangs attacking other members of our society, and that is equally wrong. And it's only by doing that that we can ensure that we really meet this moment, that we speak for the nation as political leaders, and we ensure that all forms of violence are stamped out in equal measure.
When we try and work out why this is all happening now, clearly there was a catalyst with the brutal situation in Southport 8 or 9 days ago. But that's not the factor alone. Why now? Why do you think things are as they are at the moment?
Well, I don't think there is actually any justification. I think it's wrong to try and draw a link between the terrible, tragic murders of children in Southport and the riots that have subsequently ensued. You know, the public anger, and anger is a human reaction that came out of what happened in Southport, is not an explanation for going on to commit serious crimes of the kind that we've seen. There is a separate debate to be had around integration and immigration in this country, but I think that is for another day, because we mustn't allow the legitimate concerns of millions of people on those issues to be tarred by the brush of these criminals, these thugs, these jobs, these morons, frankly, who are out on the streets causing harm, hurting people, smashing up shops. They're very separate issues, and we shouldn't see a link between the two.
If immigration is an excuse, then, for some of this action that you're describing as taking place in the minds of those who are carrying it out, what do you think about the government's decision to drop the Rwanda policy? It was a policy that you championed. In fact, you wished it had been harder and firmer in its legal underpinning than it was. Do you think that has contributed, the decision to scrap the Rwanda policy so soon in the government's tenure, to the riots that we've seen?
I don't want to draw that link, because I don't think there is, as I say, any excuse for this kind of disgraceful behaviour. I do think separately that the decision to abandon our only credible deterrent to the small boats crossing was a grave mistake. It is one that will harm this country and will set back our efforts to secure our border. It was either gross naivety by Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, or it was an act of self-harm for this country. What we're going to see now is a new wave of illegal migrants coming into the country that will place huge pressures on housing, on public services, on community cohesion and tensions in the years ahead. And one thing I have certainly said in recent months, years, has been that if parties of the centre-right or the centre-left don't bring forward credible proposals to tackle both legal and illegal migration, which are legitimate concerns of millions of people, then we shouldn't be surprised if that does see the rise of more extreme elements. And what the Labour government has done now,
that abolishing
I think will
immigration
cause a lot of difficulties for us.
But you also said there was no link towards...
Well, I don't think there's any excuse. So if you are concerned about these issues, as millions of our fellow citizens are, that is entirely separate to going to commit acts of violence, to far-right thuggery or sectarian gangs. I don't want to draw any link between the two. And now, actually, frankly, isn't the moment to be discussing this, because the moment right now is backing the police to the hilt, restoring order to our streets, protecting the public. Once this has been quelled, let's hope that that happens very soon, then I think we can step back as a country and say, how well have these matters been policed? Are there concerns about the way in which it's been handled? Has it been done selectively or not? And then there is a broader national debate to be continued about the appropriate level of immigration. My view on that is very clear, that it's far too high today, that mass migration is causing serious problems and challenges for our country. But that cannot and should never excuse acts of violence.
So let's talk about policing, because you yourself have tweeted about two-tier policing. As far as I could see, most recently on the 10th of March. Does that phrase, two-tier policing, have any application in the last 8 or 9 days?
Well, I have been very critical of the police in the past, particularly around the attitude of some police forces to the protests that we saw since October the 7th. You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
what about the
Allah
last 8 or
Akbar
9 days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested, or project genocidal chants onto Big Ben and that person not be immediately arrested. That attitude is wrong, and I'll always call out the police for it. I think at the moment, the police are doing their very best. You know, we should thank our brave police officers. We should support their efforts. They need now to be arresting the rioters. I want those individuals who've committed these serious crimes to be sent to jail for the longest possible term. I don't think at this moment politicians should be doing anything to make the lives and jobs of our police officers any more difficult than they already are. But there will come a time, once this violence has been quelled, where we can look back and see how well have these matters been handled, have each type of violence, wherever it's come from, been handled with equality, and that is very important.
There's another phrase that you used on the 22nd of February in Parliament, where you said, quote, "We've allowed our streets to be dominated by Islamist extremists." It was in the context of the debate that had taken place the previous day, where Labour avoided a potential rebellion based on their amendment going forward. What do you think when you look back at that particular phrase?
Well, I think I was absolutely right. And, you know, there were instances back then where we saw Islamist extremists on our street. I've just given you one example where you literally had somebody chanting or shouting Allah Akbar off Oxford Street. We saw people commending the Houthis for firing missiles at British-flagged vessels, you know, in the seas. You know, that is completely wrong. That is anti-British, and we should be calling it out. And what I don't want to see are politicians or sections of the media closing down the debate on those important issues, because it would be irresponsible if political leaders were not able to debate and to discuss rising levels of extremism, whether it's Islamist extremism or indeed on the far right. And as I said earlier, if that happens, then we just open up space for extreme parties to come forward, because they would then be able to be, in fact, they would be the only avenues through which people could air those concerns. And that would worry me. Like, that's a dark place for this country. So I will always call out these issues and speak up on genuine concerns but we must choose our language with great care when we approach these issues.
Which is, I guess, what I'm getting at. You've used two-tier policing. You've used the idea that our streets are dominated by Islamist extremists. And even if you give context, and people can argue if it's legitimate, the full and legitimate context, for the individual situations when you use those phrases, this past 8 days, we've also seen people unequivocally break the law and cross the line in a way that you have condemned. I think it's fair to say, in part, with some of those ideas at the forefront of their minds. I guess my question on all of it is, even if you can find legitimate context for those phrases at the moment that you use them, do you sit here today, step back and pause and think, I'm not going to use those phrases as readily again, or even potentially regret using those phrases?
No, absolutely not. What you are arguing for is to close down debate in this country.
I'm not arguing for anything. I'm asking you the question.
Well, the question you're asking is, should me as a political leader in this country not raise the question of Islamist extremism?
But
should I not raise the question
you're saying
of the
it's
far
dominating
right?
our streets.
Well, how could you argue otherwise when you see somebody, hate marches through the streets of London, making British Jewish citizens feel deeply intimidated, where you've got people chanting in praise of the Houthis attacking British-flagged vessels? These are disgraceful scenes.
But I think it's just...
I will always call that on any side of this issue.
From an immigration minister, former immigration minister, and a leading MP, there is the importance of nuance.
I always try to.
No, and just as the idea that Elon Musk is saying that civil war is inevitable is clearly ridiculous. We've had 400 or 500 arrests. It's appalling. In 2011, we had 3,000 arrests. We're a population of 67 million. It does not define the nation. James Cleverly, Priti Patel, many of your colleagues have come out and said that on the show this week, as have the government.
Well, I actually think we have a serious problem in this country
of extremist Islamists dominating streets.
I think we have a serious problem of extremism in this country. I think integration is clearly not working properly. We have far too high levels of mass migration, which is putting immense pressure on housing, on public services. I think there is diminished trust. I think too many of our politicians do not see this because they don't see the consequences. It's not them who are living in communities where people are living segregated lives. It's not them that are experiencing intercommunal violence and that diminished level of trust. I don't want to close down this debate. I want to have it conducted in a responsible manner where politicians choose their language with care. You're absolutely right to say that. But if we as parties of the centre-right or the centre-left fail to have this debate, then not only will we fail to address the legitimate concerns of millions of people in our country, we will also open up space for parties on the extreme, which will lead to some of the challenges we've had in recent days and weeks.
Is Reform a party at the extreme?
No. No, Reform is a mainstream political party that millions of people have voted for. I don't condone everything that they say or all their candidates or the comments of their leadership. That's not my role. I'm a member of an entirely different political party. But I think we have to listen to the reasons why people voted for Reform. And what I want to do is bring back many of those individuals, those voters, to the Conservative Party and make my party the natural home for small C Conservatives right across our country.
If you were to win and you were leader, how long realistically will it take for the Conservative Party to win again, perhaps by-elections or, more importantly, general elections?
Well, I'm a realist. I think we have a mountain to climb. My party needs to change a lot. We need to listen to the public. We need to learn from our mistakes on issues like immigration, but also on the economy and the NHS. And if we can show that we've changed, if we can show that we understand the serious challenges facing our country, that we have solutions to those challenges, that we are more united than we have been in the recent past, then I think we can win again. Not in 10 years, not in 2 terms, but win the next general election.